Well, hi, welcome back to another episode of Lead or Be Led. I am really happy with the results we're getting from the show. We're getting lots of viewership. We're getting lots of very, very nice compliments from people who really think we're doing a nice job. So that's good, but we need your participation. We need you to certainly share the show with your friends. We need you to comment below after the show, talk about some of the experiences that you have had in the subjects that we discussed with our guests, and really be engaged and be a part of what we do here at Lead or Be Led. Now, you know, we're always talking about bringing you all types of leaders of people, leaders in the marketplace, leaders in branding, and leaders in social media. And certainly today, marketing has taken on a whole new approach as we go into this next part of what the web is going to be. And so our guest today is a gentleman who I think you're really going to enjoy. Let me introduce him. Our guest is the author of a brand new book called The Science of Marketing. And The Science of Marketing, which we'll have up on the screen here in a bit, you can get a good look at the cover, is available at all major bookstores and all major online outlets. And the author is a guy who I think is just an absolute hoot. I've been on some webinars with him. He has a Guinness Book of World Record. We're going to hit that one first so I don't forget. But let me introduce to you right now, if I could, Dan Zarrella. Dan?
How you doing?
Good. I'm doing very well. Dan, tell us first, how's the book selling?
The book is selling very well. Just from a writing perspective, it was one of my favorites to write, number 4, and they each keep getting better. So I'm really pleased with it.
Outstanding. So let's hit that Guinness Book of World Record thing first. Tell us what happened. Tell us how you are in the Guinness Book of World Records.
So back in August of 2011, we held a webinar called The Science of Social Media. And that was essentially to announce my third book, Zarrella's Hierarchy of Contagiousness. And so in that webinar, we had 30,000 people register for and 10,890 something attendees. So just under 11,000 attendees. We had a Guinness adjudicator, which is a very official person with a blazer and a patch from the Guinness Book of World Records. Come up to the office and certified that everything was all right, and then we got a plaque in the mail, and we're in the Guinness World Record. We have a Guinness World Record for the world's largest online marketing seminar is the official title. The world's largest webinar, essentially.
That is a bar brag that you could have there in Cambridge, where your corporate office is outside of Boston. So that's good stuff, very good stuff. Well, Dan, you call yourself a social media scientist, and I don't know if that's a title unique to you, but can you give us a little insight? First of all, what is a social media scientist?
So I go to a lot of marketing conferences. I read a lot of marketing books and blogs, and I hear a lot of advice it's unicorns and rainbow stuff, right? So it's a lot of engage in the conversation and be awesome and stuff like that. And it's hard to disagree with, because I'm not going to come here and tell you to punch your customers in the face or anything,
right.
But that kind of advice isn't generally based on anything more substantial than what feels right, which truth. Yeah. Stephen Colbert's phrase. And so as a social media scientist, I like to collect data and do analysis, science, and experimentation on how people behave online and how marketers can leverage those behaviors.
Okay, so we are talking specifically, too, about the behaviors that people have with their content, as well as trying to gain that thing that escapes all of us. And I'm going to ask you to help us out with a little bit of a definition. SEO. Tell us what SEO is.
So SEO stands for search engine optimization. It is actually how I started my career, and I think a lot of sort of modern digital online marketers sort of started with SEO. I know a bunch that did. Basically, what it means is, how do you get your website to rank at the top of Google when a customer or prospective customer searches for something that you sell, right? Or a problem that they have that you can solve. And so that's what I started, doing SEO back in 2002, essentially, and then migrated from there into social media and kind of the work that I'm in today.
Okay, so now you've taken the book, which, by the way, excellent book. I was saying to you before we went on air that the introduction alone, I just was totally enthralled with it last night, and went through the book pretty quickly. I'm really, you've got a great body of work here that anybody that's involved with web marketing needs to understand. You broke the book down into different sections, and that makes it easy to understand. In the book, you talk about reach, you talk about conversation, you talk about positive versus negative when it comes to what you have, and this is all the introduction. You talk about timing and you talk about calls to action, just to set the stage for the rest of the book. I mean, Dan, in my opinion, that first part of it is a discussion that could be yet again a whole nother book. But first, let's break that down. Conversation. Tell us what you found about conversation, because everybody tells us if you're going to be in social media, you need to get out there and you need to converse with your followers.
Yeah. So conversation is one of my favorite ideas to challenge, as it were, sort of the hegemony of the
Debunk.
conversation
Okay.
in social media. Not necessarily debunk, but begin to question and begin to understand beyond just, well, you need to do it, right? And so a lot of the research that I've found, comes from the position of, being a marketer, being a fairly mercenary marketer. I'm very concerned with the bottom line and results. And what I found is that, the conversation doesn't lead to more followers. It doesn't lead to more comments it doesn't lead to more views on your blog. Like a conversation on your blog post getting a lot of comments doesn't lead to more views or links on a blog post.
How about does it lead to a relationship though between the person that's there?
Yeah, it can, and that's what So my wife, for instance, does social media and customer service, and it is important for her job. Or like at HubSpot, if somebody has a problem with our software, with our product, or one of our content pieces, and they tweet at HubSpot's going to respond, right? So my argument is not don't engage in the conversation. My argument is that when you are looking to build reach, don't think that the conversation is the most important thing.
Okay. All right.
In my opinion, Twitter is essentially a broadcast medium with a sort of two-way comment feature built into it. And I think the best, one of my favorite, at least, examples of this is if you look at the top, say, 100 Twitter users, right, that are most followed Twitter users, and you take away the people that are celebrities, so the Ashton Kutchers and the Kardashians and stuff, and then you take away the huge brands and the media outlets, the New York Times and the JetBlues and all those kind of folks. What you're left with is accounts that were not popular prior to Twitter. They got famous because of Twitter with millions of followers. Okay. And the vast majority of these accounts are automated. They are pushing out a ton of content. They aren't engaging in the conversation at all. You have accounts like OMG Facts, and the Notebook and things like that are just essentially pushing out links, quotes, facts that may or may not be true, things like that. They're using Twitter as broadcast, right? And so there are no good examples of somebody who's built a major reach on Twitter or in social media just by engaging in the conversation, except for maybe Gary Vee is the only example that I can come up with. And he's a very early adopter. He had a successful web show already. So it's it's kind of a tough example there.
Yeah, for our viewers, Gary Vaynerchuk, just a great speaker, a great social media person, a great e-entrepreneur. And I tweeted him one night, and darn if he didn't get back to me within like 3 minutes. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. So now you also talk about in conversation, though, or in what you post content, positive versus negative. So let's talk about that for a second.
So that's, in some places when I look at a unicorns and rainbows sort of superstition or myth, I often find that the data proves it wrong. But in some cases, the data proves it right. And I report on that too in my work. And in this case, people always talk about stay positive and, because people go to social media to feel good. The data, for the most part, supports it, right? So typically speaking, positivity works better than negativity because people don't go to social media to get bummed out about the world around them. They have the evening news for that if they really want to, right? But so positivity works better than negativity, but negativity works better than neutrality for the most part. So neutral is really the bad one to be. Positivity is the best one to be.
So the answer really is have an opinion. Positive one certainly helps more. But if you have a negative one, it's better than having no opinion at all.
Yeah, I would just be careful. Don't get the reputation of just being a negative Nancy or Debbie Downer type type outlet in social media.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now you also hit very early on in the book here the myth of timing. When you actually broadcast your message, when you send out tweets, when you post things. Tell us a bit about timing.
So I always try to preface my timing data or any discussion about timing data with the reminder that the kind of science that I'm doing, the kind of research that I'm doing is based in huge data sets. So I'm looking at millions of rows, in some cases billions of rows of tables. And my best practice, my aggregate best practices that I'm reporting on may work for your business and they may not work for your business, right? But they're going to work for a large majority of businesses, and so they should be taken as a something to experiment with. So with that in mind, when you talk to most marketers and you say, okay, when's the best time to email or when's the best time to tweet? The way their mind starts working is that, okay, well, let's figure out when Twitter's the busiest or when email is the busiest, when it's the most active. But if you think about that for a couple of more seconds, it's completely backwards. So if you think about you're at a noisy party, right? And you can barely hear the person in front of you 10 feet in front of you talking. And so you start telling some embarrassing story. But then you know how the crowd sometimes get really quiet instantly. And that's when everybody can hear your story.
You can tell the story that you talk about in the book. Go ahead. You can tell them the story.
Yeah. So suddenly, I mean, it's just sort of a funny thing. I just say that everybody can hear, you talk about how you wet the bed till you were 16. And so that's how I think marketers should think about timing. And I
Yeah,
call it contra-competitive timing in the book. I've written
yeah,
quite a bit about that concept. But I mean, in a lot of cases across social media and across marketing channels, I often find that the best times, like the most retweetable times, the most likable times,
sure.
or the
Yeah,
the times when email gets the most clicks or opens are sort of off peak times.
yeah, yeah.
Our nights, weekends, stuff like that. So, and with the preface that I gave at the beginning of that part of the conversation, don't take that to mean you should only email on the weekends or you should only tweet on the weekend. That's not
Sure.
what I'm saying.
Yeah,
What I'm saying is that there's a lot of marketers who aren't doing those things, and they should
right.
experiment with them because sometimes it works amazingly for us here at
Yeah.
HubSpot or for me personally.
There's day segments, and you have to understand the day segments, and
Yeah.
your data tells you that. Good, good. Let's hop in. I'm going to just turn my sheet here to the next piece, which is the book sections, and I'd love to get into every bit of the book sections, but I'm going to break it down into what's in the section. So first, let's talk about content.
Yeah, so content is the first kind of chunk of the book. It's the first couple of chapters, and in that I talk about specifically two kinds of content. I talk about webinars, which is one of my favorite pieces of
Oh,
content.
you're great at it. You're great at it.
Speaking in front of an audience, whether virtual or physical, but live is something that is awesome. And I think probably the reason why I enjoy webinars so much is that the web has made so much of our experience sort of asynchronous.
Yeah,
So I'm reading an email and maybe it's fast, but it's still delayed, and it's not we've lost that sort of we're all in the same place at the same time.
Sure.
Where were you at that time thing? And that's why I love doing webinars. And like I do a weekly Twitter chat now every Friday at 2 p.m. called Side Chat. That's half webinar, half Twitter chat.
Yeah.
But just to bring back some of that sort of immediacy and
Well,
synchronicity.
and for those viewers who have never been on one of Dan's webinars, you talk about getting miles per gallon. The man can fit as many words into a minute as I've ever seen a person do. You are
Thank
one
you.
fast talker, but you're content rich. So I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I think they say that we can speak at a certain speed, but we can understand at an even much higher speed. Man, your webinars are packed with information, and you just got to make sure you have plenty of coffee and listen very, very carefully to the master. So that's number one in content, webinar.
Yep.
What comes next?
Ebooks. I forget the order specifically one way or the other, but
Yeah.
Ebooks are also in that section, and I talk about producing ebooks. And one of the interesting things about that is I did some research and I did a survey, and I actually did the survey twice. And I asked sort of HubSpot folks, about ebooks, and they told us a very HubSpot-y kind of answer. And they gave us, ebooks are essentially white papers, or they're like, books about short 20 pages PDF downloads about marketing topics. But then I used SurveyMonkey's audience panel and was able to look at sort of normal people, normal folks, and I asked them about ebooks, and I found out that ebooks to them are something entirely different. Ebooks to them are 50 Shades of Grey on a Kindle at the beach. Right, and it's a very different thing, and so that's the data that second survey set is the data that I present in that. In that chapter, to help you understand, even as a business producer, if you're producing content for your business, there are certain things you can do and certain ways you can behave and ways you can package your content to make it more attractive to the mainstream sort of real person audience.
Yeah, and you tapped into something with the research that I thought was interesting and stuff that something I've come away with when I've talked to people, and that is the reading of nonfiction, the application of business books to life. People have a pretty lopsided view of how much time they spend reading business books.
Yeah, people had actually reported reading business books actually quite low. Ranked it pretty low. And I was shocked to see that. The other thing that I was really surprised at in that data set was the number of people who print out business related reading.
Yeah, well, and you know what? That's where I stand too. Nonfiction, I'll read electronically all day long, be it a pad, be it a Kindle, something like that. But my business books, I'm a traditionalist maybe, but I want your book. We'll hold that up again. I want your book on my shelf so that I can dog ear, underline, grab a quote when I have to go do a presentation or give a speech, and I want to quote Dan Zarrella. I want to be able to find it in the book right away and see the column notes that I've written. So that's really an interesting piece of data.
Yeah, when I wrote this book, what I was really thinking is that, folks would read it through at least once and then keep it on their desk as a reference manual to give them ideas of stuff to experiment with, new things to try, et cetera. So I really, the print version is I'm love digital books myself. I love ebooks, but the print version is really the way to go with this one.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting. And we'll move on from this, but you go through the airport, and what does every news rack have in it but business books? So
Yeah.
someone's reading them, but it's just it's an interesting study that you've put together that people find that not as important. But I think your data shows that the ebook that you were first referring to, the one where you go to a website and you sign up and you get a free download, that there's opportunity there for getting people to begin reading business material.
Yeah, yeah, and that's how we do a lot of our lead generation here in HubSpot, is by offering a piece of content in exchange for contact information.
Right, and you guys are awesome at it. You've got I send people to your collection of ebooks constantly. First to learn about HubSpot, which we'll talk about too at the end here, and inbound marketing. But it's a great collection of books. So the next section is channels. Tell us about channels.
So in channels, I get into the sort of channels by which you can spread pieces of content, or you can spread messages. Mm-hmm. So I talk about Facebook, Twitter, blogging, SEO, and I believe I have a chapter on Pinterest, a very short chapter on Pinterest in the book. And that's where I kind of get into. That's where the meat of my data is in those channels, and how to leverage those channels to spread your content, to spread your message, to build your reach, and to get more out of the bottom line.
So give us one surprising piece of data from the channels section.
Other than the ones that we've covered already about the sentiment and the timing and the contra-competitive timing, I think something that's really interesting is, maybe not surprising, but I think interesting and useful for a conversation, is the idea that please retweet works. So social calls to action. Please retweet 100% works. Now, I've had debates. I've done a video debate with David Meerman Scott, the author, about using please retweet. I like it. He doesn't. And so we had this fun, in-person back and forth debate about it. But it absolutely works. And across the board, even in Facebook, when I look at it, calls to action work there. Posts that mention the word like have more likes. Posts that mention the word comment have more comments. If for some reason, prior to the web, prior to social media, marketers knew that if you wanted somebody to do something, you had to ask them to do it. You had to be closing.
It's a call to action.
It's a call to action, and it's a classic part of marketing. Right. But for some reason, when we came to social media, we just forgot about it, right?
Yeah.
It became whatever, uncouth, uncool, déclassed, just to ask people to do things. And the research backs it up, both on that really really please retweet or Facebook level, but then also at a sort of just more general level. There's been great research done at University of Connecticut by a researcher named Irving Kirsch that found that social requests work just as well as full-on hypnotic trances. Yeah. Right. And so it's asking people to do something and doing it politely, like please. It absolutely works, and what's surprising to me about it is that people have forgotten about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing as when people are in a crowd and somebody needs to take control. As soon as someone speaks up and tells the crowd what to do, they do it. And it's that same basic human reaction to that. So, and I think that is a fascinating piece of information, and I have learned from you that is something that I should ask people to do. I don't do it enough, but it's something I need to do more, especially after reading the research in this book. So the next area, I'm going to give the acronym, and then you can take it from there. MOFU. Now, that was a word we used in Jersey a lot, but I think it has a different definition than the one you're talking about.
So here at HubSpot, we use the terms MOFU and TOFU essentially to mean the middle of the funnel and the top of the funnel. So if somebody is just in your industry, in your audience, and they're at the top of the funnel and they're just a Twitter follower or a web visitor, they download a piece of content, become a lead. Now they're into the middle of the funnel, and then they're at the bottom of the funnel when they actually buy your product. So it's a sales funnel sort of analogy. And what middle of the funnel, or MOFU, means is the processes by which you take somebody, a lead that came through one of the channels, probably converted on a piece of content, and then you turn them into a customer, or you turn them into a hot lead, essentially. And so in that section are chapters on email and lead generation. The email chapter focuses on data, about email sending, about transactional email, essentially lead nurturing type email campaigns, from large data sets, and a lot of really interesting things there. And then the lead generation chapter is mostly about forms.
Yeah. Okay.
And how to get people to fill out your forms, what types of forms get better responses, et cetera.
Gotcha. Okay. And finally, analytics, which is really the crux of this book. I mean, analytics tells the story, analytics proves the point. But just a quick word on analytics, and then we're gonna move towards wrapping things up and talking a bit more about some really important definitions of the things we talked about today.
Yeah, so the analytics chapter is honestly pretty short. I think there are other books out there that'll do a better job of teaching you the entirety of analytics. And my goal with this book wasn't to teach you analytics, it was
Right.
to present to you a bunch of data that you could potentially use.
Yeah.
But I think analytics is too important to completely ignore.
Right.
Because, and my favorite rap quote, I think sums up my feelings on analytics. If it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. If you're doing marketing and you're being paid to do marketing, or you're paying for marketing, you need to know how much you're getting back, right? You're not in
Right.
business to make friends, although that's a great side effect. You're in business to pay the bills, and
Hmm.
you need to know what your marketing efforts are producing. If the bottom line dollars and cents ROI, and so I address that in the book, and then I talk about what I call canary or proxy metrics, the metrics that lead to ROI and measuring them. Um, but at the end of the day, it's ROI is really the most important thing to measure.
Yeah, I mean, that's important in this discussion, too, for folks to understand. We're talking about marketing here. We're talking about conversion. We're talking about selling. And it brings us to the subject of what inbound really is and then what HubSpot does. So if you could just tell our audience, just for, I hate to use the term elevator speech because one of our previous guests said that term is gone. But what is inbound marketing? What is HubSpot?
So marketing prior to the sort of modern phase of marketing was outbound and interruptive. So you'd be sitting down to watch an episode of Mad Men, or reading a magazine, or the newspaper, or listening to the radio, or sitting down to dinner, and a marketer would interrupt you with a cold call or a TV commercial or a radio ad, and they would interrupt you. What the web and what other technologies that have happened around the same time, like cell phones, for instance, that all have caller ID, I don't pick up cold calls anymore. I TiVo through ads, right? I'm
Right.
completely banner blind online.
Yeah.
And so what inbound marketing is instead of interrupting the content that people want to consume with your message, make your message the content they want to consume and draw people into your brand like a magnet, essentially. So inbound versus outbound is the paradigm we like to talk about here at HubSpot.
Gotcha. So what is HubSpot?
HubSpot is a marketing software company, has a wide suite of marketing software tools to help businesses get found online and convert those visitors, the people that find them online, into leads and then eventually into customers. And we have everything basically you need to do great inbound marketing online, social tools. We just launched a new social inbox tool that's super amazing. We have great email tools. We have awesome, dynamic content tools. We have a content optimization system. We have all this stuff that you need to do great inbound marketing online.
Outstanding. I mean, Dan, there are so many more things we can talk about. I want to plug a couple of things right now, if I could. First of all, this fabulous book, The Science of Marketing. It is just an absolutely fascinating read. I urge you to go out and grab it. I'm sure it's available everywhere, Dan, right? Can you tell us, where we
Yeah,
can
as far
find
as I
it?
know, I'm always tweeting the link to it on Amazon. I don't really have too many bookstores around me on the Strip in Vegas, so I haven't seen it in a bookstore yet. But I'm sure it's in bookstores. I know they all have it. So and if they don't have it and you really want to get it from a bookstore, just ask them and they'll order it for you.
I have to tell you, with great, probably great news for you. I searched it last night just to pick it up and give it a read before our interview today, and it was in every Barnes and Noble in the area that I'm in, which is the Boston area. So
Awesome.
good job. You have it distributed out there. The other thing I want to plug for HubSpot coming up, which I know you attend each year, is the Inbound Conference, where people can learn a lot more about the science of marketing when it comes to using inbound.
Yeah, we have an awesome conference this year. Amazing speakers. You're going to be so pleased you went and saw these guys talk. Beyond just Dharmesh and Brian, the folks that we have, I guess every time our two founders. We have Nate Silver, just for instance, is one of the keynotes that's going to be amazing. So definitely make an effort to come to Inbound 13. It's we had Cyndi Lauper last year, so
Yeah.
I don't know how we can really top that, but I'm sure we will.
Right before we came on, I looked to see if the act had been announced yet. It has not, at least online. But you can go to HubSpot's website at HubSpot.com and you can seek out the Inbound Conference there. Then you can go and you can buy this book from Dan Zarrella, our guest. I know he'd appreciate it, but I know you're going to appreciate it even more. Being a leader is really involves so many things, but today's world has gotten a little complicated, and we now are talking directly to the customer, and so Dan's book is extremely important for that. So Dan, with that, I'm going to thank you very much for being with us today,
Thank you.
if you hang around for a few minutes, I'm going to wrap up the show, and I just want to chat with you. Well, folks, that was an absolutely amazing discussion. I could talk to Dan for hours on end. The guy is fascinating, has done tons of great research, so certainly keep an eye on him. We're going to wrap up the show today. I hope you enjoyed it. I do want to remind you, please share the show with your friends. Tell them that it's here. Please certainly comment on our website and join that discussion. And certainly, when you can join us, there are plenty of episodes that happened before this one, and there are plenty more to come. And also, give us your feedback at leaderbled@algetler.com and tell us what you'd like to see on the show. With that, that wraps up another episode. Take care.